thank you all for making it, and thank you very much for filling out that questionnaire when you signed up, because that has allowed us to kind of shape this session and make sure we're getting to everyone. So I'll let you know what you've told us and we'll launch into some questions. But first, I'd like to introduce our panel. So we have with us Thijs van der Heyden, and he founded Australian in 2016 with the aim of giving Australians hassle-free access to high-quality e-bikes. He developed his love for cycling via the Netherlands, where he basically grew up on one. And he also used it for daily transport as well as road racing at the national level. And when he moved to Melbourne in early 2011, he discovered what e-bikes really meant to him, the freedom of getting around and being in control of your journey. So welcome, Thijs. And can you tell us what was your first experience with an e-bike?
Thanks, Ellie. Yes, that was probably around 2006, so there was a very different era still as far as e-bikes were concerned, very clunky, but even then you could see the potential already coming. So obviously we've come a long way and it's really excited to be here tonight, but yeah, that was a very, very long time ago already.
Yeah, totally. Gosh, it must have been a very different experience back then. Thanks,
yes,
Thijs. So next up, we've got Nell Sedano, and Nell is a self-confessed bicycle tragic, having rediscovered cycling late in life and discovering e-bikes even later. She now spends much of her waking hours riding, building, finding, fixing, dismantling, converting, accessorizing, and just generally messing about with bikes, and loves teaching and encourages others to join in. Nell, when did you first ride an e-bike?
I first discovered an e-bike when I arrived in Melbourne as a refugee from Sydney, and I was at Ceres Environment Park. There was a come and try session from Rev Bikes, and they were showing people about the possibility of converting a regular bike into an e-bike with a kit. And at the end of that session, which I sort of thought, oh, it's a bit beyond my fairly terrible DIY skills at that point. But at the end of the session, we got to ride a bike, and that was it. It was all over Red Rover. I decided at that point, you're never too old to have a happy childhood. And yeah, I was sold.
Perfect. Thank you. And we've also got Joyce Watts. Joyce is a keen Melbourne cyclist who rides bikes as a mode of transport, and she's also the owner of online bike accessory store Cycle Style, and fills her cargo bike full of books and craft materials to produce creative events for families as Wheelie Good Fun, which is an excellent name. And her family of 4 own 7 bikes between them, including an e-cargo bike, and she's saving up for her own e-bike soon. Joyce, welcome. When did you first ride an e-bike?
I actually first rode an e-bike as part of a fashion shoot. So I borrowed an e-bike and I took it out for a ride along the Maribyrnong River in Footscray, wearing a dress and high heels. So, I mean, I wear that kind of my normal clothes while I'm riding a bike anyway, but it was particularly spectacular zooming along that river path in beautiful flowing clothes.
Oh, I'm imagining it now with a big like train out the back or something. Perfect. Thanks, Joyce. And lastly, we have Maury Abbott, who's the secretary of the Banyule Bicycle Users Group, the Banyule Bug. And Maury started riding in 2000, riding to work in the CBD several times a week. And since retiring, Maury's been a Banyule Bug member, I think, for around 17 years, usually completing at least 2 rides a week in the greater Melbourne area. Welcome, Maury. And when did you first try an e-bike?
Well, my first encounter with an e-bike was about 10 plus years ago when I went to a meeting in Heidelberg. And Elliot Fishman, who's an academic transport innovation advocate, and he was the speaker at the meeting. And he actually arrived on his e-bike and impressed us all, because there weren't all that many around at that point in time. And then when he departed, he just glided off into the night on his e-bike at a great rate of knots. And forever since, I've been very impressed. So, but we have a lot of people in our group are riding e-bikes. And of course, you know, we all have to give them a try. You know, the new bike comes up, oh, how's this? So, yeah, so there's a steady progression of people hopping on for a ride.
Yeah, perfect. I can imagine. All right, so just before we dive into questions from the participants, I just want to show you a bit of the information that we gathered from you guys when you were signing up. So you see the graph there. So in the virtual room, we have a good mix of experienced and new cyclists, and that's a great outcome. E-bikes are so versatile and can be used in a multitude of ways. So hopefully we'll have a lot more riders at the end of the session. So second.
Oh, sorry, Ellie.
Oh,
I don't know if we can see your screen. Did you share?
No. Oh, sorry, guys. Sorry, I haven't actually clicked share.
There we are.
How rude. So that's that first thing that I was babbling on about without you being able to see. Second is showing that almost 70% of us, if you include that I've test ridden, have never regularly ridden an e-bike, and it's cool that we're also interested in finding out more. Third, shows us that we'd be using our e-bikes for all sorts of activities and maybe competing with the car for some of these trips, which is great. And lastly, we got a pretty even amount for the different topics, so we'll try and cover them all throughout the night. So my first question. So we had a few questions about e-bikes and fitness. Tice, can you tell us, if we get an e-bike, are we really just cheating? Are we not getting any exercise at all?
No, that's absolutely not true. So I think the comparison, well, for me anyways, cheating is only defined within the context of a competition where there are certain rules. So yeah, if I would be on my road bike and I would be in a race, then yeah, someone rocks up on an e-bike, then that wouldn't really make me feel good. And it's also not allowed for that reason. But if we're just going about and just wanting to go from A to B, I think the concept of cheating is really just a bit silly, without offending anyone. And it's really about getting that regular activity into your daily habit, and that's where the e-bike really shines, and it really makes it easy to just leave that car aside for all of those short trips. And so what that really means, and what research also shows time and time again, in particular from Europe, where e-bikes have been around for a longer time and sort of the adoption is a few years ahead of where we are in Australia, what it shows time and time again is that people that do get an e-bike actually start riding more than what they used to do on their normal bikes, and hence they actually get more exercise. And so if you look at some of the health guidelines as well, what they usually say is it's not so much about the intensity of that exercise, it's much more about the regularity of it. And that's really where an e-bike makes that hurdle just a lot lower to get that more regular exercising. So no, cheating, absolutely not.
So you can actually ride them as a standard bike if you want to, and pedal along and use pedal power.
Yeah, with pretty much all bikes, well, all bikes have got to have pedals that actually are able to propel the bikes. Otherwise, it's not a street legal e-bike. So yes, you can always pedal them yourself. With most bikes, they are a bit heavier than regular bikes. So while we talk to a lot of people that initially say, "Oh, I'm just going to use it without assistance," when you talk to them after they've had the bike for a little bit, they will not have done that nearly as often as they would like, just because, as they thought initially, just because the feeling of having that a little bit of extra boost is also very addictive. But yeah, you can ride them. You can ride them like a normal bike as well. And you would still be pedaling anyway, even with the assistance, right? So that's the key thing, is you're still having that pedal movement. You're still getting your cardiovascular exercise. And you can basically, depending on how much assistance you choose from the bike, you can sort of regulate how much exercise you want to get out of it. If you put it on the lowest support setting, you're still doing a lot of the work yourself, whereas if you increase the support setting to its highest level, then it really gets a lot easier.
Yeah, right. And so you would say that it's also sort of reducing overall emissions, in that you might not have used your bike to ride down the shop, but you now are. So it's replacing the car rather than replacing other bike trips.
Yeah, the e-bike for me is really about willpower. And it frees up willpower to do other things. So whereas with a normal bike, you might have to really, push yourself to make that decision to, okay, I'm going to take the bike for this particular trip. With an e-bike, that decision is a lot easier. And therefore, you just you've got more energy and more willpower to do other things. So yeah, absolutely. That's where it really can help us with the placement.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks. So the second most asked question was in relation to charging. Nell, can you please tell me how far can I get with a charge? And am I in danger of running out of battery in the middle of nowhere and having to lug this thing home somehow?
Okay, so this is the question, the answer to which is how long is a piece of string? It's the duration of your ride depends on a number of things: the capacity of your battery, the weight of the rider, the type of terrain, and even the weather. If you're riding against a headwind or something like that, you are going to draw more battery power. So, but I guess the fundamental thing is battery capacity. And also, as Ty's mentioned, most e-bikes have what they call PAS, or pedal assist levels. So you can, if you keep in the low numbers, so typically between 3 and 5 levels of pedal assist. And if you do, say, 70% of your trip in levels 1 or 2, you're going to get a much longer ride out of that battery capacity than you will if you're riding it in the very top levels of power assist. So it's about altering the levels of pedal assist to suit the terrain and your energy level and how much effort you want to make to get to sort of, if you're interested in greatest sort of range.
Yeah, and so if I was commuting sort of in Banyule over to Greensboro, say 10 to 15 Ks up a couple of hills just to work and back, would it be within a day that I'd have to recharge, or a couple of days?
Most modern batteries range from about what's known as, they're measured in either amp hours or watt hours. A typical sort of entry-level bike might be 10 amp hours of it's like this fuel tank size, if you like. So for that trip, so how to put it, you'll get, if you're pedaling at all, they generally give you a range depending on the size of your battery, and they'll say, oh, that's good for 30 to 50 kilometres. So again, if you're in those lower levels of pedal assist, you can expect to achieve the higher range of the expected range. If you're riding up with the maximum assistance, you're going to achieve the lower end of that range. But typically a commute from, say 15, 20 kilometres, with a mid-sized battery, you'd charge it up every couple of days.
Perfect. And do I need some sort of special charging kit at home to be able to charge a regular e-bike?
All bikes, whether they're factory fitted or whether they're aftermarket bikes, they come with a charger, and that charger has to suit your battery voltage and has to be matched with the system. Because the other thing that charging does is it does a kind of health check of all the cells in the battery, and it does this function called balancing. So towards the end of the duration of the charge, it just sort of checks with all the cells that they're feeling healthy and they've got a matched charge, and it makes sure you don't overcharge your battery, which is stressful for the cells inside. So you just plug it into that. You can usually do it in situ with the battery on the bike if you can park it close to a power point, or you can remove the battery from the bike and take it into the position close to a power point. Generally, they take between 3 and 5 hours to charge, just again, depending on the capacity and how much you've depleted it. But you can pop them on overnight.
Yeah, amazing. And how about the battery's lifetime, i.e. do you need to replace batteries very often?
Not very often. Again, it's that how long's a piece of string, how often you use the bike. A battery's life, or the type of chemistry in e-bike batteries, the life of that battery is measured in recharge cycles. So how many times you recharge it. So if you're buying an e-bike, even though the battery is probably the most expensive component of the bike, I'd probably advise people to get as big a battery as they can afford, because it means that you're not having to recharge it quite as often. And therefore it's not going through those recharge cycles, and because ultimately that alters the chemistry and it doesn't take a charge so much, and symptoms of that are takes longer to charge and it's quicker to exhaust it.
Awesome.
But
thank you.
Typical modern e-bike, you would expect between 600 and 1,000 full charge cycles. So if you're charging it a couple of times a week, you can do the maths, and
yeah,
you know, you can, and providing you follow the charging instructions, that you get good life out of them now. And many are replaceable with aftermarket things, and hopefully the promise of cheaper batteries, smaller and lighter, is coming. You know, we have been expecting it for a while, and for some reason, I'm not sure of it, hasn't really eventuated at this point, but it's definitely on the way.
It's on the way. Thank you. Another cohort that are online tonight were wondering about how they can kind of get rid of one of their cars, specifically for using around the school drop-off. So Joyce, I wonder what your advice might be for parents looking to drop a car, and say we wouldn't class ourselves as fit. How easy is it to lug around kids on the back of a bike?
Well, my cargo bike actually has my children on the front of the bike. So I deliberately chose to have a cargo bike at the front rather than at the back, so I could see what they were doing. So my kids are now 7 and 9, and they still bundle themselves into that box, and I pedal around something like 75 kilos now, because my bike is about 25 and each of them is about 25, 30 kilos. The beauty of the e-bike battery is that I'm able to do that. So I can carry up to 100 kilos quite comfortably, and I wouldn't, you know, I'm a average size female, so I'm no athlete. I use that cargo bike a lot, not only for carrying my children around, but also just for general grocery shopping, if I have to carry big things, going to Bunnings. So it really is our second car. It makes our life so much easier, because the only other car that we have is actually my husband's work car, so he actually needs it for work. And because we live in the inner city, it helps a lot. And frankly, statistically, we know that most people are traveling about a 4K radius from their home the majority of car trips, and that can easily be replaced by a bike, and even better, replaced by an e-bike.
Yeah, perfect. And one question I would have about those e-bikes, the cargo bikes specifically, is how heavy they are to sort of, if you're getting them in and out of the garage, are they kind of hard to maneuver before you're on them?
It's like having a big shopping trolley. So if you imagine how the width of a shopping trolley and the length of a shopping trolley, that's about the size of my cargo bike. So they're not nimble, but they're not meant to be. They're meant to be sturdy vehicles, because you're putting precious cargo like children inside them.
Yeah, perfect. And I had one other question that was about bikes for young people, for teens or youth. Is there a specific type of e-bike you would suggest for a commuter bike for those younger people?
I don't think there's any particular brand for younger or I don't think age has anything to do with the choice of e-bike that you choose. It really is how you're going to use it. There are no, as far as I know, children's e-bikes at the moment, so like literally for kids under 12, and I think that's probably also a bit risky, because e-bikes can actually go quite fast. So, you know, once you hit the teenage years and you're probably an adult size, then you can go on any e-bike, really.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you. So speaking of safety, I guess, Maury, we had a couple of questions about safety on the road. Are there many issues in your opinion about e-bikes sharing bike lanes? Is there an issue of speed when it comes to that?
I don't think there would be really, because like I ride a lot in the bike lanes on road bikes and sort of utility bikes, and you encounter e-bikes more and more often these days, and I just don't find that it's really an issue.
And are e-bikes limited in terms of what speed they can go?
Yeah, there's because we use the only one that you can really use on the roads and the shared paths is the a pedelec bike, which is a government specified specification, which limits the motor to 250 watts and the top speed to 25 kilometres an hour. And then you have to pedal, as we mentioned previously. You have to pedal to actually have the power applied to the motor. So to get above 25 kilometres an hour, you have to be doing all the work.
Yes.
Yeah. So.
And in terms of just a bike in general, what are the biggest things that we need to think about if we're inexperienced riders just going onto the road to start riding? What are some things we should think about?
Number one, know your road laws. You really need to know, and it's one thing I do find frustrating at times. Sometimes people don't drivers and bikes don't stick to the rules, and so that's number one. The other issues is you've got to always, because you're vulnerable on a bike, e-bike or standard bike, and if you do get involved in an incident with a vehicle, well, there's a fair chance you're going to come off second best. So you really do need to be exercise lots of care, keep plenty of vision on what's going on around you. Yeah, you need to be able to hear what's going on around as well, because sometimes that can help. So that's my recommendations. Just vigilance, stick to the rules, and don't be reckless, and don't take chances. Like that's. Just as an example, there's been quite a few incidents in Sydney of the Uber riders and so forth on bikes, and some of those could be using e-bikes, but they could possibly be illegal e-bikes as well. They may not be pedelecs, but hard to say. But see, those people are under lots of pressure to deliver and so on, so they probably take unnecessary risks. So so minimising your risks is really number one. And also when you if you're doing a particular route, let's say commuting to work or shops or whatever, you really learn what are some of the tricky bits that you need to be super careful about. So
perfect.
My recommendations.
Thanks very much for that. And Nell, you're a conversion expert. Is it possible to convert just your normal bike to an electric bike, and how effective is that?
Absolutely, it's possible. I spent 18 months or more working for a small private business, has now a shop in Nunawading, and that was their main work, is to take virtually any suitable, by which I mean properly built, not your Kmart bike, but any well-made bicycle, commercially available, with the exception of carbon fibre built bikes, tricycles, children's bikes, anything can be converted. Their ranges, the things we could put a motor on used to amaze me. A lot of people with recumbents also would motorise those. We did a lot of different vehicles for people with various disabilities. Aftermarket kits are really getting more and more sophisticated and more refined, and the great advantage is that you can pick your battery size. You can, if you know you're only going to ride off-road, if you've got like a hobby farm or a bush block or something, you can have a larger capacity motor. But there's also lots of, the main thing is street legal bikes mainly for commuters. Yeah. But
Perfect.
tricycles, anything's possible with
that. Was going to be my next question. If I'm not confident in sort of balance, is there three-wheelers that you can get in an e-bike version?
Yeah, there are some ready-made ones. I believe a company called Pro Gear makes a ready-made one. There's also an outfit called Monster Pro that markets a ready-made tricycle, and there are others. But they're one of our major lines of business at the shop was putting motors on trikes. They're unusual ride trikes if you are used to a conventional bike. You lean differently on them. They can feel a little bit tippy, but they are a very good option for stability if your balance is really compromised.
Amazing. Thanks very much. Tice, I guess what we're here for, we're all going to go out and buy e-bikes next week. So we need to know what should we actually think about when we're going to do that? And what are some of the considerations that people might need to think about before choosing their e-bike, the different types of motors and those kind of things?
Yeah, so the funny bit is everyone has been doing that for the last few months already. So your choice at the moment might be a little bit limited, and it might require a bit of patience, but that's a different issue. That's just COVID-related supply chain issues in the bike industry as a whole. Overall, basically the first thing to do is to think about what you'd be looking to do with your bike. So like we said before, whether it's commuting, whether it's off-road related, whether you're looking to keep up with your Sunday morning road riding group, whether it's you're carrying your family or cargo around. That obviously is the first sort of point of what type of bike am I going to look at, and then obviously there's a budget question as well. So you can you can get bikes from $1,000 or so or less even on eBay nowadays, and the most expensive, even just factory built e-bikes, they're close to 20 grand at the moment. So there's like a huge variety, the same as with cars, and that also reflects a level of quality and not only in the e-bike system, but the bike itself and all the different components, obviously. So within each of those categories of bikes, you will have that sort of quality difference. So then the main thing is just go out and do some test riding and have a look at the different types of e-bike systems. So we spoke about like Nell spoke about the conversions. There's the mid-drive systems where the motor is basically in the center of the bike, which tend to be the sort of more popular but also more pricey bikes at the moment. They've got a different sort of level feel to the riding experience than bikes that have the motor inside the rear or the front wheel. So that gives you a very different dynamic there. So that's definitely one of the things to then look at. And then obviously make sure you get the right size for you so that you feel comfortable and confident on it. But the main thing is to actually go and ride them. And that might be a little test ride around the block, but even think about longer term test rides, like for example the ones that you can win tonight. So it gives you a week to try it, and that's the sort of where you can actually really do the trips that you're looking to do with the bike. And I think that's a really important starting point. And that gives you a much better idea of what actually might work for you. And so that may or may not be the bike that you're trying at that moment, but then it gives you a much better informed decision moving forward.
Yep. And if we do decide to buy an e-bike rather than lease, what sort of upkeep is there? Do we need to service them quite regularly?
Yeah, as with any bike, and in particular with the e-bikes, because of the additional power that you have on the bike, and that creates additional forces through the drivetrain, so through the chain and the gears, and also because of the additional weight, the brakes tend to wear out a bit faster than on a normal bike. So yeah, generally, if you look at manufacturer guidelines, they would say a service every 6 months or 2,000 kilometers. So if you're a very heavy duty commuter, you might definitely be looking at a service more often than that. And that's really just to keep your bike in good shape and keep it safe on the road. And then in addition to that, one of the things, especially if you're spending a lot of money on your e-bike, is to make sure you get a good lock with it, and have a think about insurance for peace of mind. So that's sort of additional costs that you have to factor into the equation.
Yeah, we did have a couple of questions about the security and whether we can sort of lock up the e-bikes with just a normal lock. Is there something special that we would need for an e-bike?
No, you can lock it up with a normal lock, but the sort of rule of thumb for locks is to generally spend about 10% of the value of the bike on your lock. Obviously, if you're going to buy a $10,000 e-bike, that's going to become a little bit hard because there's no locks that are $1,000, and you don't really need to either. But yeah, it basically means that you gotta make sure you don't. If you're going to buy say a $2,000 or $3,000 e-bike or whatever it's going to be, don't buy a $20 lock, but really spend some money on that because they are popular, and those types of locks are very, very easy to sabotage by any thief that's with their name. So yeah, that's definitely.
Sorry.
Go ahead now.
If I might jump in there too, one of the things that thieves have discovered is the value of an e-bike battery. So if you're leaving your bike, if you commute and you can't take your bike into an underground park or something of that nature, it's probably worth slipping the bike out of the battery out of the battery cradle and taking that up to your desk with you. The bike's much less attractive without the battery, and often it's easier for thieves just to move a battery on, put it on Gumtree, get a couple of $100 for it. So if you are going to leave your bike for a while, I would suggest taking the battery out. They're not the lightest things to lug around, so it's really more of a commuting thing. But and the other thing that I find helps with all kinds of bike thefts is to just carry a little nylon cover and throw it over. If there's nothing that is visually eye-catching for a thief, they're just going to go to a bike that is all bright and shiny and red and is next to yours, and they're not going to, you know, it's pretty obvious for them to sort of lift up a bike cover and it really stands out as them, you know, really puts them in the line of the thief. So I find that a very cost-effective way to, and also a bit of weather and rain protection.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, thanks for that. And also, Maury, if we're just sort of starting out as riders, is there any bike upskilling courses that you know of, or ways that we can sort of start to get into cycling?
If someone's already a rider, there's some differences in how the bike performs, and after they've used it for a while, they should really become accustomed to the different braking and the weight balance in the bike and so forth. But if you're starting from scratch, that's a different story. You probably could start. I haven't actually. I've taught people to ride normal bikes, but I haven't actually taught a person, just starting off from scratch, using an electric bike. So maybe some of the other panellists might have some ideas on that. But I think the transition from going from a normal bike to an e-bike, while there's differences, I think most riders will adapt to that pretty readily and go for it. The one thing I'd just like to mention is that e-bikes are a fantastic thing to extend people's riding life. Right? Now, in the Banyule Bike, we have quite a few people have opted to, when they're finding, because we live out here in the northeast where there's lots of hills, right? It can be, become quite a task riding up some of the hills, and that's the great thing that an e-bike does. It flattens hills. So, like we have our range in our club is generally, it's sort of most people are over 50. Our oldest member is early 90s, and he's just recently changed over to an e-bike. So, and we have a lot of people are using the e-bikes, and the main thing it's doing, it's extending their life on bikes. And health, also all the health issues go with that, and all the social stuff that goes with that as well. So
yeah, good point.
Yeah, so they're all fantastic aspects of e-bikes.
Thanks. Yeah, we're very lucky in Darebin and Banyule to have lots of creeks and rivers running through, which means lots of hills. So perfect terrain for the e-bike. Joyce, one of the questions we had was about advocating. How can we help spread the news about e-bikes and moving from cars to sustainable transport? Any advice on that? Yeah, Joyce, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Ellie froze on me and I wasn't sure whether the question was directed at me or not. Basically, be the change you want to see. So to the extent possible, while I could take my car to pick up my kids from school, I deliberately make a choice to take my cargo bike. Partly it's about convenience, because I don't have to deal with parking and whatnot, but also partly it's about showing people that it is entirely possible to do that. And we always get lots of waves and people saying how great it is and stopping me on the street about our bike. So that's the best way I find to be an advocate, is to be the change.
Amazing. And we kind of touched on this before, but Tice, you might be the perfect person to answer this. Can we lease long-term an e-bike just to give it a try?
Yeah, you can. So that obviously gives you a different way of getting a bike. So the way in which we do that is mainly as a salary packaging offering. So that's through an employer, like you could lease a car and pay for that bike out of your pre-tax salary. There's some other options available now as well. Yeah, there's different ways of getting hold of an e-bike for your needs at different points in time, I think.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Okay, so we're getting near the end of this Q&A section. So I might just go around to our panelists and ask, what's the one thing we should know about e-bikes, or the thing you always get asked, or where should we start in looking for an e-bike or getting back on our normal pedal bike? Nell, to you first.
Yeah, look, my great passion is getting people back onto bikes, and that's from personal experience, the difference it made in my life at a time when I was at a very low point and unhealthy and overweight. And once I got onto bikes again, it just transformed things. And I find cycling, particularly for women, is just one of the most gentle exercises. It just works for our bodies so well. I can tell you, you're never too fat, too old, too sore, too grumpy to get back on a bike, gals, or anyone. And recently, and a lot of women my age come to me and say, oh, how do I choose a bike, or how do I choose an e-bike? It's not as straightforward. Choosing an e-bike is not as straightforward as just going out and buying a bike, where you really have to just think about the frame size. Do your research. Understand the difference between the two chief types of motors, as Ty's mentioned, a motor in the hub, in the wheel, or the newer, perhaps newer generation mid-mount motors. They both have advantages and disadvantages. There are good quality bikes at whatever level you go into, but start with what you want the bike for. I think that's really good information. I recently took a friend through it. We started with, well, what do you see yourself doing on this bike? Do you need to lift it onto a car for travel? Do you want it to fold? Things like that. Just think of all the things you might generally want to do with a bike. And that way you can eliminate things that you don't need, and you won't need to pay for, like if you know you're never going to ride more than perhaps 20 or 30 kilometres, there's no point spending another $400 or $500 on a battery that will take you that far. So think about what you want to ride, add a little bit because you will want to ride a bit further than you have been. And go into the processes, yeah, enjoy the process, it's great. And just go to as many bike shops, talk to as many people as you can, and ride the bike. Don't buy anything that you haven't ridden. It's got to work for you. The balance has got to feel right. And as I said, with the different types of motors and things, the balance points will feel different, and that may or may not have an influence on how often you ride. But yeah.
Thank you.
It's just great fun. That's the bottom line of e-bikes. So you feel 10 years younger just throwing your leg over them, gal.
Amazing. Well, that sounds very good. Murray, how about you? What's the one thing you always get asked, or where should we start when considering what bike to get?
Well, one of the things I'd like to mention is that when I was back in my working days, I actually used to commute into the city from out the northeast, and several times a week. That was about a 26k ride. So to be able to do that, I had to have good facilities at my destination to have a shower and change and so forth. Now, for use with an e-bike, particularly for shorter commuting, you can wear your work clothes and not need to do that sort of thing. So just for the shorter commuting, maybe something less than 10 k's or whatever on an e-bike, you can probably just wear your work clothes. And if you go travel over in Europe and whatever, that's what you see. You see everyone's just riding around in their work clothes and so forth, and doing it easy.
Yeah, that is a good point. We don't all have those wonderful end of trip facilities yet, although hopefully they'll come in the future as well.
What was the other part of the question you asked me there?
Oh, I think that was it. Just what's your one thing that you want to be the takeaway for people out there? Yeah. So just give it a go.
Yeah.
Okay. Joyce, what about you? One thing that you would like to let us know about e-bikes, encourage us to try?
Sure. Lots of people ask me whether having a cargo bike is safe. So this is not specific to e-bikes. I have had children in there since they were in a bassinet, so they were facing me. And obviously it really depends on how comfortable you are with risk, because I do ride on roads with them. However, I personally have had no issues with it, and I'm comfortable with that. And they're safe because they're in a capsule and then they're in a box. And frankly, cars take a wide berth around seeing a woman pedaling with children in a cargo bike. So that's one thing. The second thing is, can I keep up with other cars on the road? Because my cargo bike is relatively wide, sometimes I prefer to ride on the road versus on a bike path, and sometimes a bike path just is not available. With an e-bike, I am able to take off from the traffic light at approximately, I'm faster than a normal bike, and I'm slower than a car who, you know, pushes, for someone who pushes straight into the pedal, but I am able to keep up. I don't have people swearing behind me going, you're going too slow and you're blocking the lane. So that's one great advantage. I can take off at lights with a very heavy bike and often children inside it at a relatively good pace. I can go up hills. So let me think. Big hill from Docklands, from Harbour Boulevard, whatever it's called, up La Trobe Street. That hill's pretty hard, and I can keep up with cyclists. And I've got, as I said, a heavy bike with 2 kids in it quite often, so I can keep up with cyclists, and I don't sweat doing it. So it brings me a lot of power. The other question I often get asked is, how much did my bike cost? So my bike is expensive. First of all, it's a cargo bike, which is expensive. Then it's an e-cargo bike, so it's even more expensive. And and I also got mine custom designed in some way for my business. So my cargo bike cost me $4,500. It's not a cheap investment. Obviously, if you're just looking for a normal a normal commuter bike, you don't need to be spending that much. I believe that you can get e-bikes starting at around maybe $1,000. But I don't think there's any headroom about the fact. Beg your pardon?
If you're competing with a car, though, it's pretty cheap.
Exactly. That's what I say to people. I use this bike almost every day. It is my second car, and yeah, I can cart children. I can use it for my business. I can carry a lot of craft materials in there, and I can travel long distances with it. And if necessary, I can take all of that onto a train. So for me, it's been a great investment, but I just also want people to be realistic about something like I have costs a lot of money. But for me, it's been a worthwhile investment.
Thanks. Yeah, perfect. And Tice, any sort of last words of advice when we're going out to look for our e-bikes?
Yeah, so I think it comes back to what I said at the start. It's the willpower thing. So basically what it does is it really gives you freedom to do other stuff and use your energy to focus on other things. And that the second part of that is that it's very hard to imagine, especially if you're not a regular rider, what you can do with an e-bike until you actually get one. So what most people find is as they go and actually start riding, every time they'll discover new trips that they can actually use their e-bike for and not having to drive. And just the sheer joy of being able to do that is just so much fun. So yeah, definitely get on one.
Awesome. Get on one. That's the final message, which is perfect. Thank you so much to all of our panelists for being here and demystifying some of that